Hey landlords, it's Hunter here. Hate to break it to you, but you might be getting taken advantage of by your tenants. And it's not just the obvious stuff. The reality is some tenants are pros at slipping into your property and turning it into a nightmare. And by pros, I mean there's a growing wave of professional tenants who've scammed landlords for years. They know every law, every trick in the book to move into your property. And once they're in, your problems are just beginning. I've been in this game for 24 years, managing hundreds of units for myself and others, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. Stuff you can't make up, like a lawyer turned drug dealer, a group of 25 people who wanted to move in and rent an apartment to hold their cult meetings, and even a guy who wanted to run a ferret rescue business from a one-bedroom apartment. But obvious red flags like those aren't your biggest concern. It's the people who know they aren't qualified who try to con their way in. If you think it can't happen to you, think again. You might even be in the middle of one of these scams right now without even knowing it. I'm going to break down the biggest traps landlords fall into when screening tenants and the red flags that you can't afford to miss. Trust me, this advice can save you tens of thousands of dollars and months of frustration and headaches if you get it wrong. Now, before I get into details, it's important to note that 98% of my tenants are fantastic and I have no problems. Well, no problems after I created the system to properly qualify the right kind of tenants with the least amount of effort. Let's face it, it's a crazy business we're in. We're basically giving strangers a place to live that we are financially responsible for if things go wrong. When I started, I had no mentor, no course, or any training, just me learning the hard way, making every mistake you can imagine. And that's why I'm making this video for you. I'm going to show you how to protect your properties from tenant nightmares before they move in. Just know that this video is for screening new tenants. If you want to see another video about what to do with problem tenants who are already in your unit, leave a comment below and I'll make a new video for that. Let's jump right in. Here are the 7 biggest tenant scams and the red flags out there. Number 1 is desperate tenants. If you're a new landlord with a unit sitting vacant, you may be excited when a prospective tenant tells you they're ready to move in today, like right now. They have cash in hand, they want to meet up, sign the lease, and get moving in now. Here's the problem with that. Good tenants are not desperate. They aren't sleeping on their friend's sofa, getting kicked out of their apartment, and need to move into a place sight unseen right now. It's a huge red flag. Good tenants give their landlords notice. They need time to plan, to move their stuff. They don't have it all packed into garbage bags in the back of their cars. So be very careful when they're ready to move in and need to move in right now. Which brings me to number 2, appearances. You won't be able to fully know this right from the beginning, but there will be signs of the type of person you're dealing with, and you should listen when people tell you who they really are. When I was starting out, I didn't heed the warnings. The phone calls where there's constant screaming in the background, like a pack of wild dogs running around and barking, drunken slurring, there are signs. I would also make the mistake of giving them my phone number right from the ad. I spent a crazy amount of time listening to sob stories and talking to people who obviously were not qualified because I couldn't get off the phone with them. It was a disaster. I quickly learned that if I set up a dedicated voicemail and asked a couple of open-ended questions, I could learn a lot. I could hear their tone of voice, I could hear their reason for wanting to move in, and that tells you a lot. What I would do in this voicemail is I'd ask them for their email. Then I would get an automated transcription of the message emailed to me so I could read it and decide if I even needed to email them back. It saves so much time and frustration. I have details in the description below on how you can set this up for yourself. 2 last things on appearance. If they pass all of the other qualifying steps I'll share with you, and there will be a lot before you actually meet them, take notice of how they dress and especially how their car looks. That is what your apartment is going to look like. And I do have one more optional step where I show up at their current rental to get them to sign one more part of the lease. And that lets me check out how they're living, because that too is what your rental will look like. Fake documents. I don't know if you realize how easy it is to create fake documents these days online. Instead of telling you, let me show you. I went online and paid a freelancer $20 to create a phony electric bill for this video. Here's what I gave him. You can see the original, and here's what he created. Now, this was just for demonstration. You probably won't ask for an electric bill. I didn't when I was renting apartments. Some landlords do, but it's mostly irrelevant. But it's just as easy for them to create a fake pay stub from an employer. So here's what I would do. I asked them for a copy of their last pay stub and for a copy of their last bank statement. Check to see if the numbers and dates match up. That is a lot more work to create, and most scammers won't put this much effort into it. And if it takes them a week to get this together, they'll probably create a fake document, so beware. Also, and we'll discuss this in another video, the best tenants will give you their employers as a reference. They want you to talk to their employers. That's a huge plus that they will be amazing tenants. I once fell victim to this when a travel nurse contacted me. She had pay stubs and sounded reasonable. From my past experience, nurses often make some of the best tenants. I have a whole mini course on this in the description below, but she said that it was just her and I was traveling at the time and I didn't call the employer or ask for bank statements. That was my mistake and the reason I changed to the steps I'm showing you now. From the moment she moved in, she and her ex-husband and another child all moved in with her. She claimed she was harassed by other tenants and she couldn't pay almost immediately. They would blare music, get drunk, and cause problems to other tenants. It was a nightmare. She even told me that she called the fire department to report that there were not smoke alarms. When I told the fire department, they said they'd never heard of her and that even if they had, they would call me first to schedule a visit. Getting lied to and getting played is one of the worst feelings. It took me 4 months to finally get them out. When they moved out, they left a disaster zone. Crack pipes, steroid bottles, and the furniture they rented and never paid for. I later got a call from a police investigator. They were professional tenants who had done the scam for years. So just know, people like this are out there and they know how to create fake documents. Utilities. Speaking of utilities, some tenants promise they'll switch the utilities in their name soon. They know that as long as those utilities are in your name, you're responsible and not them. Once they've signed the lease, paid up, and have the keys, they've established residency. At that point, you can't force them to transfer the utilities, and you certainly can't shut them off, even if they never pay a dime. Professional scammers know this loophole, and they'll take advantage of it. To protect yourself, make sure that when you hand over the keys, no utilities are in your name. The tenant should have to set up everything themselves by showing their lease to utility companies. That way, the responsibility and the bills stay with the tenant, not you. Always transfer possession, not the burden of utilities. Keys before cash. This has to do with tenants' payment to move in. I wouldn't accept any money until after or during the lease signing. And you need to make sure their check is going to clear before even thinking about giving them the keys. If they move in and the check doesn't clear, you're out of luck. Here's the process I use to keep things simple. I set up a bank account for the rental. If you have several rentals in one building, it can go to a single bank account, but you want to keep it separate from your personal bank account. After they sign the lease, have them deposit the money into the account. I give them several options to do this. They can physically go to the bank and deposit it. The account number is already on the lease. Another way is they can electronically transfer money using their bank to my bank. They could also use Zelle or Venmo. And I can also send them a link to apartments.com where they can pay through there. The important thing is that the money has to completely clear before they get the keys. You don't want to take a check, hand over keys, and hope it cashes. It's way too risky. Most of my rentals were out of state. So I told tenants from the beginning that I don't accept checks mailed to my house because I'm often traveling and I also don't go door to door to collect. Maybe you have a different system, but if you tell them that from the beginning, they know the rules and are okay with it. The most important takeaway is that you make sure you get first, last, and security and pet deposit before you give them access. Another similar tactic you may hear is that they don't have the full amount right now. They may ask you if they could pay the deposit over the next couple of weeks or months. And things like this do come up in life. Sometimes it's hard for them to have the full amount right from the beginning. But what happens when the next expense comes up? Maybe their car breaks down and they can't get to work. They already know that you're flexible with late or slow payments. So again, this is a terrible idea to go down this path. If they tell me they don't have the money, I let them know that other people waiting and I really can't wait for the agreed upon moving cost. Here's another one people will try to pull, the switch up. You may get into the screening process and be told the person you're talking to isn't the applicant. They're searching for a friend and they themselves won't actually live there. To me, this is a huge red flag. Why can't the person search for their own place? I've heard excuses from, well, they work too much or they just need some help getting started. This is a common tactic used by people with bad credit or poor rental histories to get a place they can't otherwise afford or qualify for. Even if they can't afford the rent, this isn't the way to start a good landlord-tenant relationship. If the person who is supposed to be your tenant is already lying about who's moving in, that's a big trust issue right from the get-go. People have all sorts of reasons for pulling this stunt, but the bottom line is simple. They're not being upfront with you, and trust is key. If they're already showing you they can't be trusted, it's best to move on to the next qualified applicant. Don't ignore the warning signs. Again, person renting should be responsible enough to use email and a phone to look for a place themselves. There are just too many good tenants looking to deal with someone who isn't honest from the start. This is kind of a tricky one and somewhat controversial, but it is a red flag. Let's talk about pets and rentals. I've owned buildings that allowed pets and some buildings that didn't. Legally, if your property doesn't allow pets, you don't have to accept them. But be consistent. You can't let one tenant have a pet and deny another. If an applicant shows up with a letter for an emotional support animal, that's your call. Just know that emotional support animals aren't the same as service dogs, and it's easy to get fake ESA documents. And watch out. Many insurance companies will drop you if tenants have certain aggressive breeds like pit bulls, Rottweilers, or German Shepherds. Always check your policy for breed restrictions. Those are some of the 7 biggest scams and red flags to watch out for. Look, most tenants are great, but the few bad apples, they'll make you question your life choices. That's why having a solid screening process is key. And I've fine-tuned mine over the years to the point where I can spot red flags in a heartbeat. If you found this helpful, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. If you want more stories from the trenches, don't forget to check out the templates in the description. Seriously, they'll save you so much time and frustration. Until next time, stay sharp, trust your gut, and happy ring.